time between midnight and dawn, when most people die, when sleep is deepest, when nightmares are most palatable. It is the hour when the sleepless are pursued by their sharpest anxieties, when ghosts and demons hold sway. The hour of the wolf is also the hour when most children are born. There's a moment in the hour of the wolf where Johann, a tormented painter played by Max von Sydow, confesses that he's not entirely sure if the people tormenting him are ghosts, monsters, or just his memories. That of course implies that he's mad, but that's very curious because we as a viewer are not entirely sure either. The film never outright tells you which it is, and that's the whole point of The Hour of the Wolf. Ingmar Bergman's 1968 Hour of the Wolf is one of his ventures into almost outright horror, though calling it a horror film feels insufficient, almost demeaning. Another one is his drama Wild Strawberries, which I find in parts terrifying. This one is a psychological descent rendered in stark chiaroscuro, a portrait of mental collapse, where the line between perception and reality dissolves with unsettling grace. But unlike traditional horror, this isn't about jump scares or gore, it's about isolation, guilt, and the terrible price of artistic sensitivity and creativity. The title refers to a Swedish superstition, the hour between night and dawn, when most people die. The sleep is deepest and the nightmares feel most real. Bergman uses this concept not as a metaphor but as a state of being. Johann is trapped in this twilight between lucidity and lunacy, between self and other. His breakdown is gradual but inevitable, like a clock ticking toward a silent personal apocalypse. He's surrounded with temptation, seduction, corruption, tactless curiosity, and dominance. His wife is always there for him. To complicate things even further, she's pregnant. We might think that this is the time for Johann to set himself aside and be there for her as much as possible. Given their surrounding, a secluded island seems like the perfect setting for such an occupation. But Johann is in no state for any of that. At its heart, this movie is about the suffering artist, a subject Bergman often returns to in his work. Johann is tortured by his work, haunted by visions that may be the price of his creativity, or maybe even its source. The Hour of the Wolf never romanticizes this, but at the same time the cinematography is undeniable. There is no nobility in his madness. It feels real, almost to a point of experiencing it yourself, and naturally there'll be no catharsis. It's more of a disintegration or a dissolvement. Liv Ullmann's Alma, Johann's wife, is the emotional anchor. A quiet presence observing her husband unravel, tormented by it. So not only is she a witness, she's a victim too. Through her, the film turns into a meditation on what it means to love someone being devoured by their own mind and their demons. You don't just lose them gradually, you start to doubt your own reality and convictions. What's even scarier is that there actually might be method to the madness. A lot of it may be true. Stylistically, the film is pure Bergman. Minimal sets, oppressive silence which is so difficult to pull off, and faces that seem to carry the weight of centuries. Sven Nykvist's cinematography turns the beautiful island into a flaming purgatory, full of hollow echoes and cruel geometry. The dinner scene at Baron von Merken's castle is made to be particularly disturbing. An eerie pantomime of aristocratic absurdity that almost feels like Eyes Wide Shut filtered through Northern Gothic anxiety and spiced with revolting small talk. It's beautifully framed, the visual language is so deliberate and masterful. There's no resolution here, no monster is slain. Johann walks into the woods and doesn't come back. The demons, whether real or imagined, consume him. And all Alma can do is remember, and try to forget for her own sake. So why watch The Hour of the Wolf? Because it's a perfect experience of dread, of beauty, of the fear that you and your thoughts may not be entirely your own. If you're a Bergman aficionado, it's him at his most raw, most intimate, introspective, and most terrifying. Oftentimes, the scariest thing a film can do is look you in the eye and say any possible kind of safety is just an illusion. Johann Borg is a painter, but more precisely, he's a man whose reality is cracking under the pressure of his own mind and vivid imagination that might be taking over. The Hour of the Wolf is definitely not just a film about mental illness. It's a dramatization of an internal collapse, of what happens when memory and imagination intermingle until neither can be trusted, when keen sensitivity and perception become your enemies. It's not that it's not there, it's just most people never see it. This collapse is not limited to the inner world. It's influenced heavily by our harsh reality. It's even more unbearable to someone like an artist. He's too fragile in the first place to handle it all. That's one of the reasons why his art is so sought after. Bergman, ever attuned to the fragile limits of the self, gives us a protagonist who is alienated not just from the world but fears his own thoughts and ideas. It also must be mentioned that being unsure of everything, he's not a man of conviction. He's far from being immune to making mistakes. The film presents Johann's psychosis not as a clinical event but a metaphysical implosion and a reckoning. We're never sure which parts of what we see are real. Are the monstrous party guests of Baron von Merken's figments of Johann's madness, or are they stand-ins for some more profound evil? The ambiguity is deliberate. Like Persona before it, Hour of the Wolf is less concerned with literal interpretation than with emotional and existential resonance. And you'll never be able to dismiss his concerns, disgust, or regret because everything we see feels relatable, familiar, and at times even revolting. It's the feeling all too familiar to every one of us when everyone around feels hostile and alien and set on bringing us down with them if you ever had the audacity to somehow give away that you're different, or God forbid happy. In Hour of the Wolf, there is no distance or objectivity. I used to speak despairingly about Hour of the Wolf, probably because the film touched suppressed sides of myself, Bergman says. Johann's isolation is not limited to geographical. He lives with Alma on the aforementioned desolate island, but it's also deeply psychological. Even his most intimate relationship begins to dissolve under the weight of his unraveling. Alma is loyal, empathetic, terrified but courageous and yet powerless. This is the real horror Bergman explores, not just madness itself, but the inevitability of love or anything else in the world to save a living soul from it. Reality casually pushes aside our hopes and dreams, our best intentions and care, and leave facing the ever-present dread. Still think The Ring is scary? When Johann meets Baron's coterie, we begin to suspect that the demons so poetically described by Johann as mere visions haunting him might not be entirely metaphorical. There's a man who walks on ceilings, a woman who removes her face, people with the names like Archivist and the Birdman. They're caricatures, yes, but also deeply theatrical, like stock characters in some cruel opera or a puppet show. What I find especially unsettling about these caricatures is that how perfectly Bergman managed to capture the mundane emptiness of their dialogue, the shallow, petty concerns, the soulless evil they represent. In just a few precise strokes, they're so recognizable and for that so impressively disturbing. If there are manifestations on Johann's mental disintegration, then there are also commentaries on the artistic world he once inhabited. These grotesques are patrons, collectors, critics, journalists, fellow creators. So the message is not subtle. The world of art devours. The artist becomes spectacle, becomes product, gets turned into a lunatic. Johann is fed to these people like a roast on a banquet, and they devour him with predatory smiles. So it turns out his madness is not something he was destined to fall to by nature. It's inflicted by the world, the people, and the society. And he's just a man, too weak to oppose its gargantuan, indifferent appetite for anything possessing a soul. And wouldn't you agree that these features aren't exclusive to the world of art? At the same time, another line of development in my idea of God begins here, one that has perhaps grown stronger over the years. The idea of Christian God as something destructive and fantastically dangerous, something filled with risk for the human being and bringing out in him dark destructive forces instead of the opposite. So who were all those who kept testing and tempting Johann? Was it the devil or God himself? Whenever someone tells you that this is a movie about a man going insane, change the subject. Bergman, who had his own complicated relationship with the artistic elite, clearly saw the creative process as one that could hollow a person out. What also scares me personally is that the nature represented by the woods of the island are so similar to the woods of Lars von Trier's Antichrist, and stand to represent hell. For someone who always enjoyed his time in the wilderness, it's terrifying. Hour of the Wolf might be classified as a horror film, but it also can be seen as a professional confession. The artists, acutely aware of the world's underbelly, left alone with their imagination, will eventually paint themselves into oblivion. One of the most quietly devastating aspects of Hour of the Wolf is how language itself begins its erosion. Johann attempts to articulate his inner terrors through drawings, mutterings, cryptic diary entries, but words fail him over and over. They fail Alma too. Her attempts to reach him through love, concern, care, and reason are no match for the abstract and tangible forces at work. This is a film where dialogue often gives way to meaningful silence, and silence gives way to eternal dread. It's no coincidence that Johann is a painter. In a world where words are powerless, sincere images created by a skilled hand remain the last stronghold of truth, but even those eventually betray him. The art of creation, which once gave him purpose, becomes another channel through which his suffering spreads. His art doesn't save him, it betrays and consumes him. And we as viewers are left to wonder whether it was art or madness that came first. His art attracted the hounds and vultures. It became a part of Johann's undoing. Visually, we as viewers are also able to see less and less. The images are barely discernible. I'm sure none of us was spared a helpless feeling of words failing us. I'm referring to the times they weren't induced by joy. Hour of the Wolf visualizes this state. The island where Johann and Alma reside is something more than just a setting. It's also a visual metaphor for the state of Johann and the point he's at. Removed from the mainland, from society, hoping this includes the past, a sort of a purgatory. The nature around the house is barren, no cozy trees, just stone, surf, and fog. Seems like a pretty fitting place for a soul to unravel slowly. When Johann walks into the sea at the film's end, it is first and foremost a surrender. He doesn't die in protest, his demise is a logical outcome. When man no longer has a sense of self, he cannot keep living. Alma keeps on going, but it's obvious that the experience scarred her. Alma's final monologue is hushed, uncertain, and in a way the most haunting part of the film. She even questions whether madness is contagious, whether by loving Johann and spending time trying to understand him, she too has been altered. She's now dealing with not just paranoia, but ultra-realism. Hour of the Wolf is obviously not a horror film in the conventional sense. There are no jump scares, no chase scenes, no final catharsis. I'm at a point where these tropes make me stop watching. What Bergman delivers is way more disturbing. The idea that your own mind can betray you, and that no one, not even the person who truly loves you most, can lend you a hand or follow you into that abyss. We arrive alone and leave alone. This is a deeply personal film, and not just for Bergman. Anyone who has watched a loved one disintegrate, whether through mental illness, addiction, or trauma, will recognize the haunting contours of Alma's heartbreak. And anyone who couldn't help but stare into their own fears for too long will recognize Johann. To reiterate, don't come expecting a resolution here. The supporting villains are out in the open, but the main antagonist is ever present yet always invisible. Naturally, no triumph of will or reason will ever come. Abandon all hope. What's definitely real is the hour of the wolf, the time when nightmares bleed into waking life, and we remember that beneath all our facades, we're still animals, inherently superstitious, tired, frightened, confused, and alone. Thank you very much for watching. Until we meet again in the next video.